I bet no one envies this last slot that I have to fill. It reminds me of an interview with, I think it was Larry Fortensky, who was Elizabeth Taylor's 8th husband, and the interviewer said, well, how do you feel being 8th? And he said, well, you certainly got your work cut out to keep it interesting. So here we go. Tā lofa lava, o te whia whātā lofa atu le paia, ma le malu o le awhia tā lofa. Lo Tiana o Patricia McDonald, o lo Tamā o ai au semi Epati, o lo Suafa o Tiana Epati. Given that Api Mahuika is my father-in-law, I'll have to do this now. Tēnā koutou katoa. I te taho taku papa na Hamoa, i te taho taku mama na Ahitereiria. Ko mā tānuku Mahuika taku hōtānei, a kōnei taku hōnunga ki Ngāti Parau, ānei. Ko hikurangi te maunga, ko waia putuawa, ko Ngāti Parau te iwi. To talk about definition of success, which was the question that I was asked, obviously begins with my story. I grew up in Samoa and immigrated to New Zealand as a 10-year-old. My father is Samoan, my mother is Australian. My parents separated, and when we came to New Zealand to start our lives over, my mother and my little brother and I, my mother, who'd been a stay-at-home mum for some time, found herself in a new country with 2 little children, but no career or employment prospects. So I was raised in Auckland by a solo mother who spent some periods on the domestic purposes benefit and cleaning houses. And that was something which really shaped me in many ways and what I wanted for myself and my idea of the future. Later on, she did attend university and she ultimately obtained a Master in Fine Arts. My father had been a man who had grown up in the village, who didn't learn English until he was 16. He was fortunate enough to win a scholarship to go to Otago University, and he went to law school. He fought very hard in Samoa to become, at the time, quite successful, but he came to New Zealand in the 1990s and had to start over. He had to be supervised just to do duty solicitor despite all his experience. No one wanted him initially as their lawyer, and to make matters more difficult, he would often be mistaken for a criminal defendant when he went to court. He was once asked to use a side entrance at a hotel venue for a conference that he was speaking at. And yet he persevered. He worked very hard and he never let it get in the way of him being the best that he could be. And in 2002, he became the first Pacific Islander ever to be made a judge in New Zealand. I think watching them both go through their challenges in their different ways shaped, obviously, my idea of what I wanted to be. I certainly wanted to have my own career. Financial independence, watching my mother struggle, was hugely important, and it was something I guarded protectively. Watching Dad, the seed which would probably later on become an almost unreasonable determination to push the boundaries was likely sown early on. I went to a public school in Auckland with a very high Pacific Island population and ended up being one of the only students to ultimately go to law school at Auckland. They were difficult years. I never felt like I belonged or fitted in with the people I went to law school with. I kept myself busy working nights as a waitress in the city, and I managed, in the end, however, to find a place in the last 2 years with the Pacific Island Law Students Association, and I became their president in my final year. There's sort of a theme that's developing here. I finished university with what Simon Moore later described as a creditable degree, but it was very ordinary. And I had very few, well, none, employment prospects apart from answering phones in Dad's little office at home. So I kept waitressing while waiting for professionals to start, and then a day came that changed the course of my life. In came a group of lawyers. They included Simon Moore QC and Christine Gordon QC. Everyone was in a hurry and wanted a special request off the menu. I was the only waitress on the floor, and it's fair to say they were pretty challenging. When they left, now His Honour stayed behind to talk to the owner about how well their waitress had deftly handled what was obviously a difficult group. He asked as to whether or not I had any training in dealing with difficult people, and the owner laughed and said, "No, but she's a law graduate and you may want to look at her." To cut a very long story short, I interviewed several times, and by the time I finished professionals, I had one of the most coveted graduate positions in probably one of the most prestigious litigation firms in this country. I spent my 4 years at Meredith Connell trying to shed the imposter syndrome and learning from some of the best trial lawyers. I found out who was considered the best. I asked defence counsel that because they knew who. And I found them. And basically I would offer to carry their bags, do their photocopying, do research for free, anything I could do. I bravely volunteered to do submissions for Mark Wolford once, Justice Wolford now, and I watched him put a red line through every single page that I had carefully drafted over a series of days and tell me to start again, and so I did. I went to Wellington later on because I met my husband. I worked at Luke Cunningham and Clare and later the Crown Law Office. Now that latter job involved 4 applications to the Crown Law Office until they finally hired me. To this day, the best job interview I ever had was the one with Una Yargos. I didn't get the job, but she rang me up afterwards and said, "I'm not going to give you the job. You haven't gotten it, but I thought I'd just give you a bit of feedback." She said, "When you came in, you'd obviously well prepared and you had the script, but can I tell you, when you leave the script and you're just yourself, that's when you shine. You are enough." I never forgot that. In the end, I did get a job in the criminal process team, and the thing about Crown Law is that I knew that they were some of the best lawyers that went to the Court of Appeal and the Supreme Court. I didn't think I was particularly good as an appellate lawyer, so I wanted to go there to learn how to be one. And I also knew what I didn't know. So when I first arrived as an Associate Crown Counsel, I volunteered to do one of the junior roles, which was summarise judgments that came out of the criminal division. For a year I did that, and I think all up I read something like 700 criminal judgments. And that really gave me some insight into the way they think, the way to craft arguments and the way they write. By the time I left in 2012, I had appeared as lead counsel in over 70 appeals to the Court of Appeal, and I'd sat in as second counsel in the Supreme Court 4 times. I moved to Gisborne and I became a criminal defence lawyer and now a partner at Rishworth Matheson. And I have continued to appear as lead counsel in the Court of Appeal every year for the last 6 years. And I'm only one of 2 lead providers who can do that on legal aid in the Gisborne region. In terms of the challenges, it was obviously difficult managing motherhood. I have 2 children, 7 and 11, and being a woman in a highly competitive environment. I did watch other males get more opportunities, be promoted and get paid more. But I think for me, the most difficult challenge to probably overcome was being an ethnic minority and an immigrant at that. And it ranges from, I think, some well-intended but patronising comments or the odd casual racist remark about Pacific Islanders, to complaints when I first arrived in Gisborne to legal aid by clients who had socially deprived backgrounds anyway. And it went something like this. Legal aid would ring me and say, "Oh, Tiana, you need to just be a bit careful. This client's rung and they're not happy with the assignment." And I said, "What do you mean?" "Well, they rang up and said, 'Well, what kind of name is that?' Tiana, Epati." And the legal aid officer said, "Oh, I think it's Samoan. Can she speak English?" Another one was they rang up and said they didn't want me as a lawyer because they didn't want a coconut for a lawyer. I can remember going up to the law school to judge a mooting competition at the university, and there was a professor who I respected greatly, I have to say, at the time. And when I turned up and said, "I'm here to judge the moots," he sort of couldn't hide his shock, well, not shock, but sort of surprise, and said, "It's really great they're hiring more of you people." Now, I think he meant that as a compliment, but you can see it's that constant sort of separation of it's the you people and then the us. There was a time where I had appeared in front of one particular Court of Appeal judge a few times. He didn't seem to remember my name, didn't appear to read my submissions, and I can remember getting in the lift to go up to a hearing in the Auckland Divisional Court, which sits on the 11th floor, and when the lift stopped at the 4th floor, he turned around to me and my Māori junior and stepped aside for us to get out on the 4th floor. And I leaned in and said, "No, I'm going where you are." Of course, the 4th floor was the Ministry of Immigration, and while we were carrying robes and books, it just didn't seem to register. But It's not all bad. Sometimes it's an advantage. I've been often underestimated, which is a mistake. When I first went to the men's prison, they just did not know how to take me. They had an idea of what lawyers look like. They certainly knew all of them. And I can remember the first time I walked through the yard and there was a basketball game going, and I thought, oh, here we go. Here's the comments are going to come any minute now. And I walked and the game stopped and no one knew what to say. I was clearly a lawyer, but they just couldn't figure it out. And as I was walking, you could hear a pin drop because all these men were still gang members and everything. And just as I was about to walk in the door, I think someone felt the need to say something. And just as I walked through, I heard this, "Hey, your lawyer's only 14. And I turned around, thank you. Carry on, man, carry on. But after a while, you can be forgiven for thinking, because it all adds up, that you don't belong, that there's no place for you in the law, and certainly not in senior roles, and certainly not in the higher courts. So how does a Samoan girl from Gisborne become a partner in a well-established firm there who appears as lead counsel in it's now 100 cases to the Court of Appeal, jury trials and murder trial, and the rest, and then run as candidate to be president of the New Zealand Law Society? And that's no secret. Two things. I had parents who instilled in me the belief that I could do anything and be anything, so long as I was prepared to work for it. And more than that, they led by example, which makes role modelling vital. If you cannot see the pathway for what is possible, you won't even dare to dream. More importantly, I think for every challenge, there was at least 4 or 5 people along the way who were prepared to stand in my corner and encourage me. They believed in me even when I lacked belief in myself. And I think that's where I found success, that I found people, really good people in this profession, to work with and align myself with, and there are good people. I've had some great mentors over the years, and many of them have been straight white males. There are champions of change, male champions of change that are out there. And my experience with the New Zealand Law Society for myself has been incredibly positive. I entered the NZLS in a very unconventional way. I was unhappy about judicial resourcing in Gisborne. I wanted to write letters and do something about it, and someone said, well, if you don't like it, then you be president. And I said, okay, I will. 2 weeks later, I was Gisborne branch president and at a New Zealand Law Society Council meeting. And I have never felt like I couldn't bring my whole self to that organisation. I've always felt encouraged and supported, and I owe a great deal to Catherine Beck. In my view, she has been a champion for the profession in a difficult time. And she's done that again and again. And at the end of the day, it's not the critic that counts, it's the woman who goes into the arena, whose back is up against the wall, who quells the thunder and rides the storm, and does so daring greatly. And so, yes, we have a lot of work to do as a profession, but there are a lot of great people out there who are committed to being champions of change, and little by little things are changing. More recently, I was sought out and instructed by the coroner to be independent counsel to assist her in a number of inquiries up the coast. I was chosen because that area is 90% Māori, and she wanted someone who wasn't just a good lawyer, but who could actually deal with these families who had suffered great loss. So she saw me as someone who could connect with whānau in a way that other lawyers could not. My own diversity and cultural literacy means that I can traverse the many, many different worlds that operate in our society. I spent one day where I was sitting on a fence in Wairoa gossiping with the president of Black Power. I got on a plane, went to a function in the Wellington waterfront and had a gin and tonic with Sean Elias, all in the same day. And I enjoyed both conversations, I have to say. So going back to the question of what is my definition of success, I suppose in these times when we are having brave conversations about fairness and equality, for myself, my own definition of success for me is actually letting go. And this is what I mean. Letting go of the rubbish, letting go of the stuff that doesn't serve you anymore, letting go of the story that you may have been told, but more importantly, the story you tell yourself. letting go of all of that. I remember once saying to my mother, I really don't know if I can do this, Mum. And she said, oh, sweetheart, I think you just need to tell yourself a new story. Because you can. So I tell myself a new story, and it begins with, I can. I can do anything I want to, as long as I'm prepared to work for it. There's been a lot of discussion today about one man, which is a bit difficult for me to talk about, my father-in-law, Dr. Tiana Mahuika. He was a man who was a great leader because he could encourage the best in anybody. He was very good at developing whakatauki for organisations, and he did one in particular for the police, which I will attempt to share with you. But I think it's a good way to end, and it's this. E tū ki te kei o te waka, kia pākia koe e ngā ngaro o te wā. Stand at the stern of the canoe and feel the spray of the future biting at your face. I want to thank everybody for this opportunity to speak. When Helen Papadopoulos rang me and said, we'd like you to speak at this Lady Hale Inspirational Career, she said, do you have any questions? And I said, yes, why me? Lady Hale, Justice Glazebrook, Justice Winkelman, the Solicitor General, I get all of that, but Tiana from Gisborne? Not quite. I don't understand that one. And then I said to somebody in Gisborne, they want me to speak at this, this address of this incredible judge, Inga Kai Whakawā, Lady Hale, Tiana from Gisborne. And she said, oh, but you're Lady T from Tairawhiti. So maybe that's the new story I tell myself, that right now I'm Tiana Epati, I'm a partner, I am a lead counsel in the higher courts, I am running to be president of the New Zealand Law Society. Whether I get it or not, I have been brave to do that, to go out there in this country and put myself in front of groups of people again and again and again. And even though I'm, part way through the journey, maybe I am a Lady T in waiting.